There are no chains in this room, no screams, no visible weapons. The chair is comfortable. The lighting is soft. The air temperature is perfect. This is not a place designed to hurt the body. It's a place designed to reshape the mind. For decades, we've all believed that torture was the ultimate interrogation tool. That pain equals truth. That suffering equals confession. That belief is wrong, and not just morally wrong. It's scientifically wrong. Modern intelligence agencies have learned something far more disturbing. The human mind can be guided into surrender without a single act of physical violence. Cinema created a lie, a dangerous one. Movies show interrogators screaming, beating, threatening, because violence looks powerful, because it feels decisive. But intelligence agencies don't want drama. They want accuracy, and pain destroys accuracy. When someone is in pain, their brain is flooded with survival signals. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic and reason, shuts down. Memory fragments, reality distorts. A person under torture doesn't give you the truth. They give you escape language. They will say whatever they think will stop the pain. From a pure intelligence perspective, torture is a failure. It creates false confessions and contaminated intelligence. It causes unpredictable psychological damage, long-term hostility, and a mountain of legal and political problems. But the biggest problem is this: torture breaks a person's resistance, but it doesn't break their belief. And belief is what creates reliable information. So, what's the alternative? Modern intelligence agencies follow a different doctrine. Do not force the subject to speak. Create conditions where silence becomes unbearable. This isn't coercion, threats, or violence. It's psychological engineering. It's pressure created by absence. Before the interrogator even says a word, the room has already begun the process. Look closely at the design of these spaces. There are no clocks, no windows, no personal items. The colors are neutral. The temperature is perfect. There's minimal sound. This isn't about comfort. It's disorientation disguised as calm. Why does this work? The human mind depends on anchors to stay stable. Our sense of time, place, identity, and routine. When you remove those anchors, the mind starts to float. And floating feels like anxiety. This disorientation doesn't feel like fear, at least not at first. It feels like unease, restlessness, a constant anticipation that something is about to happen. The subject doesn't know what is wrong. They just know that something is. Then the interrogator walks in. There's no aggression, no display of authority, no intimidating uniform. They just sit down, make eye contact, say nothing. This silence is not passive. It's an active form of pressure. The human brain evolved to read social cues: speech, reactions, feedback. Silence removes all three. At first, the subject thinks, okay, they're just waiting. Then, after a few minutes, their thoughts shift. Did I do something wrong? Why aren't they talking? Then, how long is this going to last? The brain, desperate for stimulus, starts producing its own narratives. And these internal narratives create profound anxiety. Why is this often more effective than pain? Pain has a cause, a direction, and a predictable response. It gives the mind something to fight against. Silence has none of that. It gives the mind nothing to grab onto. And for a social creature like a human, that is terrifying. The internal pressure builds. Seconds stretch into what feels like minutes. Heart rate increases. Thoughts spiral. What do they know? Why aren't they saying anything? Should I say something? This is the moment most people break. Eventually, the subject speaks. Not because they were asked to, but because the silence became intolerable. This is a critical moment. Because now, the subject has crossed a psychological line. They are no longer just resisting. They are participating. This voluntary speech is crucial for three reasons. First, it immediately reduces their internal tension. Second, it creates emotional exposure. And third, it establishes a pattern of compliance. Their brain learns a simple, powerful association. Speaking brings relief. This association is the foundation of the entire interrogation process. And notice this, the interrogator does not interrupt. This is deliberate. Interrupting would restore control to the interrogator. By letting the subject talk, they create the illusion that the subject is in control. And people reveal far more when they believe they are in control. An anxious mind will always try to fill the empty space. It over-explains. It clarifies things that don't need clarifying. It corrects itself mid-sentence. And every single correction is a crack in the armor. Interestingly, highly intelligent individuals often talk more in these situations. They trust logic. They believe a good explanation can fix any misunderstanding. They assume the system they're in is rational. But this kind of interrogation is not a rational system. It's an emotional one. Innocent people are especially vulnerable here. They often think, if I just explain everything clearly, this will all end. That belief is then weaponized against them, because every explanation invites more questioning, and every question creates more doubt. This is the crucial point. The interrogation is not about discovering facts. It is about reshaping perception. The interrogator already has a framework, a story they want to be true. The subject's role is to slowly, piece by piece, accept that framework as their own. At some point, the subject has a cognitive shift. They realize they're not reacting the way I expected them to. This creates deep discomfort. So their mind starts adjusting its strategy. It offers more detail, more honesty, more openness, hoping to get the expected reaction. And then, after the subject has poured out their thoughts, the interrogator goes silent again. But this time, the silence is even worse. Because now the subject has been conditioned. They've learned the loop. Silence equals pressure. Speech equals relief. Repeating this loop makes the subject psychologically dependent on speaking. At this stage, the subject believes they are managing the situation. As long as I keep talking, they think I'm in control. That belief is false. Talking is exactly what is deepening the trap. The interrogator hasn't accused them of anything. They haven't threatened them. They haven't demanded a thing. Yet the subject feels exposed, uneasy, and completely off balance. That's because control has shifted invisibly. No laws are broken, no rights are violated. The subject chose to speak. Psychologically, this creates a sense of ownership over the process, and ownership dramatically increases compliance. So by the end of this first phase, silence feels dangerous. Speaking feels safe. Environment feels controlling, and time feels distorted. And it is only now, after the mind has been completely primed, that the interrogator introduces the most dangerous weapon of all, understanding. Or rather, the illusion of it, false empathy. But that's a story for next time. Have you ever wondered what the most dangerous sentence in the world is? It's not a threat. It's not an insult. It's just two simple words. I understand. In the world of high-stakes interrogation, these two words have broken more resistance than any physical force ever could. Why? Because understanding feels safe. It feels human. And that's exactly why it's such a powerful weapon. Imagine this. An interrogator leans back. The tension in the room suddenly shifts. The aggressive posture is gone, replaced by a subtle warmth, a nod, a softer tone, and then they say it. I understand. This isn't about kindness. It's a calculated strategy to dissolve your identity. Aggression builds a wall, and a wall invites defense. Defense strengthens who you are. But understanding melts the wall away. The interrogator doesn't act like an enemy. They position themselves as reasonable, calm, and fair. They might say things like, I get why this happened, or anyone in your position would have struggled. These aren't accusations. They're invitations. Invitations to agree. The moment you nod, even slightly, a psychological shift occurs. Agreement feels harmless, but it's the first step toward alignment, and alignment is the first surrender. This is what's known as false empathy. It has one goal: to make resistance feel completely unnecessary. If the person questioning you already understands, why would you need to defend yourself? Your brain, which evolved for social survival, starts to lower its guard. Your threat perception drops, stress hormones decrease, and the trust mechanisms in your mind activate. Without you even realizing it, you start to open up. You're no longer just answering questions. You're explaining yourself. You start talking about your motives, the context, your feelings. You start telling a story, and stories reveal so much more than facts. You can control facts, but stories are filled with emotion, personal meaning, and justification. These are the very things that expose your deepest vulnerabilities. And the interrogator just listens. They listen incredibly well. No interruptions, no corrections. No corrections. Just occasional nods and small affirmations like, "That makes sense," or "Go on." This act of being truly heard is addictive. Most of us are rarely listened to without judgment. When it happens, it feels like a massive relief. Your brain registers this relief as a reward and starts to learn. Talking to this person feels good. This is a critical turning point. You stop thinking, "What should I say?" and start thinking, "How do I explain this clearly?" You've shifted from defense to disclosure. The interrogator then subtly reframes your actions. They don't say you were wrong. They imply you had your reasons. And reasons make actions feel forgivable. Actions that feel forgivable are much easier to admit. The crushing weight of guilt becomes manageable, light enough to speak aloud. At the same time, something strange is happening with time itself. In this environment, there are no clocks, no sunlight, no schedule. Time becomes a blur. This is intentional. Time gives us structure and a sense of control. Without it, you can't measure progress. The end feels imaginary, and a deep cognitive fatigue sets in. This isn't just about being tired. Your brain is exhausted from constantly evaluating, resisting, and trying to stay consistent. Your memory starts to feel unstable. Details blur, sequences get jumbled, and your confidence in what you remember weakens. The thought creeps in, "Maybe I don't remember this perfectly." That single thought is deadly. Because now, the interrogator doesn't need a confession. They just need your doubt. Doubt softens your perception of reality. This is when the soft accusation comes. They won't say, "You did this." They'll say something like, "It looks like this might have happened." The language is careful, designed to invite a correction. And here's the trap. When you try to correct them, you often reveal more. You say, "Not exactly," or "Well, actually." And with each correction, you move closer and closer to their suggested narrative. Reality becomes negotiable. Inside your mind, a split begins. One voice screams, "Stick to the truth." But another, quieter voice whispers, "Just make this end." And that second voice is getting louder. The interrogator senses this. They go silent again. But this silence is different. Earlier, it created anxiety. Now, it creates a feeling of loss. The warmth, the connection, the understanding, it's all gone. This withdrawal is a weapon. The human brain reacts to emotional withdrawal like physical pain. You want that feeling of connection back, so you start talking again just to restore it. Every time you disclose something, the empathy and attention return. You are being conditioned. Silence equals abandonment. Speech equals connection. Without realizing it, you've become dependent on their validation. This prolonged exposure to doubt and validation erodes your very sense of self. You no longer feel like, "I know who I am." You start to feel like, "I'm trying to understand who I am." This uncertainty is what they've been working towards. Even people with the strongest identities can break because they fight harder to make sense of the contradictions, and that effort just accelerates their exhaustion. Then comes the moment your self-trust completely collapses. A quiet thought appears. What if they're right? It's not acceptance, just curiosity. But curiosity toward an accusation is all it takes. The interrogator doesn't push. They wait because your own mind is now doing the work for them. You start seeking their guidance, asking, "What do you think happened?" Or "How bad does this seem?" The roles have completely reversed. The interrogator is now the authority on your reality. The room feels smaller. Not physically, but psychologically. Your options feel limited. The only path forward seems to be cooperation. The last thing holding you together is hope, the belief that this will eventually end. And now, even that hope is about to be weaponized. The interrogator introduces possibility. They'll use subtle phrases like, "This goes smoother when people are honest," or "There's a way through this." They don't make promises because promises can be doubted. They offer possibilities which invite your imagination to fill in the blanks. Your mind connects the dots and arrives at a new belief. If I just say the right things, this can all stop. This is the final setup. Silence has become unbearable. Their empathy feels necessary. Time is endless, and your identity is unstable. Cooperation now seems like the only logical choice. All that's left is for them to attach your hope for freedom to one single action: confession. And at that point, the battle is already over. This deep dive into psychological tactics shows just how fragile our sense of self can be. Let's talk about the moment things change in an interrogation room. It's when you stop thinking about truth and you stop thinking about innocence. You start thinking about just one thing: ending this. Imagine it for a second. There's no clock on the wall, no certainty about what comes next. You have no control. It's just you, a quiet room, and a voice that starts to sound like the only way out. Hope doesn't storm into a room like that. It arrives quietly, almost by accident. It's a simple, harmless-sounding sentence. Something like this doesn't have to be so complicated. Or, "We're actually closer than you think." Or even, "There is a way through this." There are no guarantees, just a hint of direction. So why does your brain cling to that? When stress is constant, the brain desperately searches for meaning. Hope gives all that suffering a purpose. It whispers, "If you just do this one thing, it can all stop." And suddenly, that one thing becomes everything. But there's a difference between real hope and controlled hope. Real hope is freedom. Controlled hope is conditional freedom. It depends entirely on your behavior, and your behavior in that room can be guided. So let me ask you a question, and be honest with yourself. If you truly believed that cooperating would end the crushing silence, restore a sense of human warmth, bring back some certainty, let you finally sleep, let this all just be over, would you resist? Most people don't. Now, here's a crucial detail. The interrogator almost never makes a direct promise. They imply an implication is far more powerful than a commitment. They might say things like, "I've seen people walk out of here after being honest," or "This whole thing goes much easier when everything is on the table," or my personal favorite, "I can't help you unless you help me." Notice what they're not saying. They never define what help actually means. Your own mind fills in the blanks. This is the critical part. The interrogator doesn't design your escape route. You do. Your own imagination builds the ending, the relief, the feeling of freedom. And confession becomes the key that you just invented to unlock that door. At this stage, information is no longer about truth. It's currency. It's payment. Every little detail you give feels like progress. Every small admission feels like a wave of relief. You give them a little piece, and you watch to see what happens. and a reward system kicks in. When you speak, they engage. They respond, they nod, they stay present and focused on you. But the moment you stop talking, the silence returns. The distance comes back. The warmth fades away. Your brain learns this pattern very, very quickly. Think about it. If every time you spoke, the psychological pain got a little bit better, and every time you stayed silent, it came rushing back, how long would you really stay silent? This is why even innocent people confess. It's an uncomfortable truth, but it's an important one. People often confess not because they're guilty, but because they are profoundly exhausted. They crave certainty in a situation that has none. They want to feel some sense of control again. They believe, often mistakenly, that the truth will ultimately protect them. And that cooperation is the fastest way to end the confusion. And that belief is what gets exploited. The final push is usually quiet. There's no yelling, no overt threats. It's just a calm statement. Something like, "This is your opportunity," or "Now is the moment to be honest," or the most powerful one, "Let's finish this." That one word, finish, matters more than anything. Then the interrogator goes quiet one last time. But this silence feels different. It feels like a punishment. It feels like loss. It feels like you're going backward. And after coming this far, you don't want to go backward. So, you move forward. You cross the line. It usually starts small. It's just a phrase, a partial admission, a softened statement. I might have, or I don't remember exactly, but, or maybe it looked like I did. Once that happens, something psychologically irreversible occurs. Your mind thinks, well, I've already gone this far, and suddenly, holding back seems completely pointless. This might surprise you, but the confession itself doesn't feel like a defeat. For most people, it feels like relief. It feels calm. It's an emotional release, a sense of safety. Your body physically relaxes. Your breathing slows down. Your mind truly believes it's over. But that feeling of relief is dangerous because it locks the memory into place. The brain now associates confession with peace, and that association can remain long after you've left that room. The interrogator doesn't celebrate. They don't react strongly at all, because a big reaction would break the illusion. They stay neutral, professional, as if this outcome was always inevitable. The aftermath is what we rarely see. Hours or even days later, you start replaying the moment in your head. You think, why did I say that? But by then, it's too late. It's on tape, it's in a written report. It exists in the world, and the full realization arrives far too late. Psychological surrender is profound. No physical force was used. No legal rights were technically violated. No violence occurred. And yet, the mind surrendered completely. So ask yourself, was it really a confession, or was it a trade? Was it truth in exchange for relief? Now, here's why this matters to you, outside of a police station. These techniques are not just limited to interrogation rooms. You see them in high-pressure workplace negotiations. You see them in social manipulation, in online influence, in personal relationships, and in any dynamic involving authority. They appear anywhere that silence, empathy, time, and hope can be controlled. The real defense isn't to fight back harder. It's to recognize what's happening. To recognize that silence can be a weapon. That empathy can be strategic. That time pressure distorts your judgment, and that hope can be engineered. Awareness doesn't make you invincible, but it makes you much, much harder to control. Think back to the beginning of this process. No chains, no physical pain, no violence, just psychology. People confess when the silence feels more painful than the truth. Thanks for watching.